A rebellious teenager crashes her old car in a Milionaies pool. What he decides to do changes both of their destinies. Hello and welcome to 80s Love Stories, where I, your favorite narrator, Christopher, bring you an exciting love story straight from the unforgettable 1980s. Get ready for a journey full of nostalgia and incredible twists. Today's story is truly remarkable, with an ending that's sure to touch your heart and leave you amazed. So, stay with me until the very last moment. I hope this experience is unforgettable for you, and may God bless you and your family. Now, let's get started. Rachel slammed her hand against the radio dial of her beat-up Chevrolet Nova, trying to find something, anything, better than the static crackling through the speakers. The warm summer breeze whipped through her hair as she cruised down Maple Avenue, the setting sun painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Come on, she muttered, finally catching the opening riffs of Joan Jett's I Love Rock Any Roll through the static. A small victory, but she'd take it. Anything to distract her from another suffocating evening at home with her father's disappointment and her mother's worried glances. The Nova's engine protested as she pressed harder on the gas, the speedometer creeping upward. She knew she shouldn't push the old car too hard. It was all she had, saved up from countless hours working at the local roller rink. But tonight she needed to feel something, anything other than trapped. The winding roads of the affluent Highland Park neighborhood weren't her usual route home from work, but tonight she took the long way, admiring the sprawling mansions with their perfectly manicured lawns and gleaming luxury cars. This was a different world from her side of town, where chain-link fences surrounded patchy grass, and most cars were held together with hope and duct tape. Lost in thought, Rachel didn't notice the sharp curve until it was too late. She yanked the steering wheel, but the Nova's worn tires lost their grip on the road. Time seemed to slow as the car spun out of control, crashing through an ornate iron gate and careening down a sloped lawn. The last thing Rachel saw before everything went dark was the shimmer of water ahead, a massive swimming pool that seemed to glow in the twilight. The impact sent water exploding skyward. When Rachel's head finally broke the surface, she gasped for air, struggling to orient herself in the chlorinated water. The Nova's front end was partially submerged in the deep end of what had to be the largest residential pool she'd ever seen. Well, this is certainly an unusual way to drop by for a swim. The calm, measured voice came from somewhere behind her. Rachel turned in the water to find a man standing at the pool's edge, wearing an expensive-looking suit that probably cost more than her car, what was left of it. Anyway, Thomas Monroe. She recognized him from the local newspaper's society pages, one of the wealthiest business owners in town. Rachel's heart sank. Of all the pools in all the mansions in Highland Park, she had to crash into his. She'd seen enough episodes of Dallas to know how this would play out. He'd call the police, press charges, and her life would be effectively over. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Monroe," she managed to sputter, treading water. "I lost control of the car, and I'll figure out how to pay for everything, I promise." Thomas Monroe studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to Rachel's complete surprise, he started removing his suit jacket and rolling up his sleeves. "First things first," he said, kicking off his leather shoes. "Let's get you out of there before you catch pneumonia. Then we can discuss how you're going to earn back the cost of my gate, my landscaping and—" He glanced at the slowly sinking Nova. "The pool cleaning service I'm going to need." As he extended his hand to help her out of the pool, Rachel caught a glimpse of something unexpected in his eyes. Not anger or contempt, but a hint of amusement, maybe even kindness. Whatever it was, it didn't match anything she'd heard about the notoriously stern business magnate. What she didn't know then, as she stood dripping on his expensive marble tiles, was that this crash would change both their lives in ways neither could imagine. Sometimes the most significant moments come disguised as disasters, and sometimes the people we think we have figured out turn out to be nothing like our assumptions. Little did Rachel know, Thomas Monroe had his own reasons for not calling the police that night, and those reasons would unravel a story far more complex than a simple car accident in a millionaire's pool. Rachel sat in Thomas Monroe's study, a massive room lined with leather-bound books and dark wood paneling, feeling like a drowned rat in her chlorine-soaked clothes. A vinyl record played softly in the background, Fleetwood Mac's rumors, while his housekeeper, Patricia, fussed over her with towels and a change of clothes that probably cost more than Rachel's weekly paycheck. The study seemed frozen in time, like something out of an old movie, with its antique desk and oil paintings. Only the sleek IBM computer sitting on a side table betrayed the current decade. Rachel clutched the delicate china teacup Patricia had pressed into her hands, trying not to drip on what looked like a priceless Persian rug. "So," Thomas began, settling into a high-backed leather chair across from her, "you work at the roller rink." It wasn't a question. He'd probably noticed her uniform beneath her denim jacket before it got soaked. "Yes, sir. The Galaxy Roller Dome," Rachel replied, wondering how much longer until he called the police. Her father would be furious when he found out. Another disappointment to add to his growing list. "Interesting coincidence," Thomas mused, running a hand through his silver-streaked dark hair. "I actually own that building." Rachel's stomach dropped. Even better, she'd not only crashed into her community's wealthiest residence pool, but also her boss's boss's boss. She might as well start packing her locker now. "Mr. Monroe, I know this looks bad, but I can explain." He held up a hand, silencing her. "I have a proposition for you, Rachel, one that might benefit us both." She waited, heart pounding, as he stood and walked to his window. The pool lights illuminated her half-submerged Nova, creating an almost artistic scene of destruction. "My daughter, Claire, is coming home from boarding school for the summer," he continued, still looking out at the pool. "She's about your age, I'd guess, but she's—" He paused, choosing his words carefully, having some difficulties adjusting, making friends, engaging with the real world. Rachel stayed silent, unsure where this was going. Through the window's reflection, she could see Thomas's expression soften when he mentioned his daughter. "I'll make you a deal." He turned back to face her. "Work here for the summer, as a companion for Claire, helping around the estate, that sort of thing. In exchange, I'll take care of the damages, help you get a new car, and keep this little incident between us." Rachel blinked, certain she'd misheard. "You want me to hang out with your daughter?" "It's more than that." Thomas sat back down, leaning forward. "Claire needs someone her own age who understands the value of hard work, someone who isn't—" He gestured vaguely at the opulent room around them. "Born into all this, and you need a way to make this right without ruining your future. It seems like a fair exchange." Before Rachel could respond, the study door burst open. A girl about Rachel's age stood in the doorway, wearing an expensive-looking dress that somehow managed to look rebelliously disheveled. Her blonde hair was cut in a sharp, asymmetrical style that would have given Rachel's mother a heart attack. "Really, Father?" Claire's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Hiring me a friend, that's your solution?" Thomas sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Claire, this isn't—" "Save it," Claire cut him off, turning her attention to Rachel. "So, what did he offer you? Money? College tuition? Her get-out-of-jail-free card for whatever brought you here?" Rachel felt her face flush, but something in Claire's hostile tone sparked her own defiance. "Actually, your dad offered to forget about me destroying his pool with my car. But hey, if you'd rather I just call the police myself and get this over with, I'm happy to oblige." Claire's perfectly made-up eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, Rachel caught a glimpse of something beneath the practiced disdain, surprise, and maybe a hint of respect. Then Claire did something completely unexpected. She laughed. "You drove a car into our pool." She walked further into the room, suddenly interested. "On purpose?" "Claire," Thomas warned, but there was relief in his voice at seeing his daughter engage. "No, not on purpose." Rachel found herself fighting back a smile. "Your fancy curved driveway did most of the work. My Nova just came along for the ride." Claire flopped onto the leather sofa beside Rachel, her earlier hostility forgotten. "Please tell me someone got it on video. Michael's always going on about how we need security cameras, but Dad thinks they're tacky." "Thankfully, no video," Thomas interjected, watching the interaction between the girls with careful optimism. "Though I'm sure the tire tracks across the lawn tell quite a story." Rachel noticed how his entire demeanor changed when Claire showed signs of genuine interest or amusement. There was clearly more to this family dynamic than the wealthy businessman and his rebellious daughter. So, Claire turned to Rachel, a mischievous glint in her eye. If you're going to be my companion, or whatever, we should probably start with the important stuff. What music do you like? Before Rachel could answer, a commotion erupted from outside. Through the study window, they could see flashing lights reflecting off the wet pavement of the circular driveway. It seems one of the neighbors called the police anyway. Thomas stood, straightening his tie. Stay here, both of you. I'll handle this. As Thomas left the study, Claire caught Rachel's eye. Don't worry, she said, her voice carrying an unexpected warmth. Dad will take care of it. He always does. Rachel watched Thomas Monroe walk out to meet the police, his confident stride never faltering. She couldn't shake the feeling that this night was about to become much more complicated than a simple car accident. So, Claire broke into her thoughts, about that music question. Please tell me you're not into that awful synthesizer stuff Henry likes. He's Dad's business partner, she explained, rolling her eyes. Shows up here all the time trying to convince Dad to modernize everything. Rachel found herself relaxing slightly, despite the police lights outside. And actually, I'm more of a Clash fan. Some Ramones, Pat Benatar when I'm feeling mainstream. Claire's face lit up. Finally, someone with actual taste. You know, maybe Dad's not completely crazy this time. She paused, studying Rachel with new interest. This summer might not be so boring after all. Outside, they could hear Thomas's measured voice talking to the police officers, his words indistinct, but his tone commanding respect. Rachel wondered what she was getting herself into. This wasn't just about avoiding trouble anymore. She was being drawn into the complex world of the Monroes, with all their wealth, power, and carefully guarded secrets. Through the window, Rachel caught a glimpse of another car pulling up, a sleek black Mercedes. A man in an expensive suit stepped out, heading straight for Thomas and the police officers. Henry, she presumed, based on Claire's earlier comment. Something about the way he carried himself made Rachel uneasy. Oh, great, Claire muttered, following Rachel's gaze. The fun police is here. Henry always shows up when things get interesting, like Dad's own personal buzzkill. Rachel watched as Henry joined the conversation outside, his presence somehow making the situation feel more serious. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was much more going on here than a simple job offer or a kind gesture from a wealthy man. The study suddenly felt smaller, more confined, as if the weight of unspoken expectations and hidden agendas was pressing in on them. Rachel had crashed into the Monroe's pool looking for escape, but instead, she might have just dived headfirst into something far more complex than she could have imagined. Claire seemed to sense her unease. Hey, she nudged Rachel's shoulder. Want to see something cool while they're all distracted out there? I've got some original pressing vinyl records that would make your Clash-loving heart skip a beat. As they slipped out of the study and up the mansion's grand staircase, Rachel couldn't help but feel she was crossing a point of no return. The police lights still pulsed outside, casting strange shadows on the walls, while Fleetwood Mac continued to play softly in the study below, an oddly fitting soundtrack to this surreal evening. Little did Rachel know, this was just the beginning. The summer stretched ahead of her, full of promises and secrets, and somewhere in between the vinyl records and chlorine-soaked memories, she would discover that some crashes lead us exactly where we need to be. Claire's room was everything Rachel's wasn't, spacious, elegant, and filled with things that probably cost more than her family's entire house. But what caught Rachel's attention wasn't the designer furniture or the state-of-the-art stereo system. It was the wall of vinyl records, meticulously organized and obviously well-loved. Not what you expected, right? Claire asked, running her fingers along the record spines. Everyone assumes I'm just another rich girl obsessed with Madonna and Cyndi Lauper. Rachel watched as Claire pulled out a record with practiced care. The familiar sound of the Smiths filled the room, melancholy and beautiful. This is definitely not what I expected, Rachel admitted. Their moment of musical appreciation was interrupted by raised voices from downstairs. Though muffled, they could hear Henry's distinctive tone, sharp with frustration. Your father can't keep protecting you like this, Claire, Henry's voice carried up the stairs, and bringing in some stranger off the street. We should probably go back down, Rachel suggested, but Claire shook her head. No, this is normal. Henry always thinks he knows what's best for everyone. Claire's casual tone couldn't quite hide her tension. Let's just... She was cut off by the sound of breaking glass downstairs, followed by Thomas's voice, unusually stern. That's enough, Henry. Rachel and Claire exchanged glances before creeping to the top of the stairs. From their vantage point, they could see into the foyer where Thomas stood confronting Henry. A broken vase lay scattered across the marble floor. "You're not thinking clearly, Thomas," Henry was saying, his usual composed demeanor cracking. "First the incident with the Anderson contract, and now this. The board is already asking questions." "The board?" Thomas's laugh was cold. "Or just you, Henry? Because lately, it seems like you're the only one questioning my decisions." Patricia appeared with a broom and dustpan, but Thomas waved her away. "Leave it, Patricia. Our guest was just leaving." Henry straightened his tie, regaining his composure. "Think about what I said, Thomas. About everything I said." His eyes flickered toward the stairs, and Rachel instinctively pulled back into the shadows. After Henry left, Thomas remained in the foyer, staring at the broken vase. Rachel had never seen someone look so tired while standing perfectly still. "Come on," Claire whispered, pulling Rachel back to her room. "Dad will be up here soon to do his whole everything's fine routine." Sure enough, minutes later there was a soft knock at Claire's door. Thomas entered, his pleasant mask back in place, though Rachel noticed his tie was slightly askew, the first imperfect thing she'd seen about him. "Well, the police have been handled," he announced, as if the confrontation with Henry had never happened. "Rachel, you'll start tomorrow. Patricia will pick you up in the morning." "Dad," Claire started, but Thomas held up his hand. "It's late, and it's been an eventful evening. We could all use some rest." His tone was gentle but final. "Patricia will drive you home, Rachel." As Rachel followed Patricia out to the car, a much more modest vehicle than the others in the Monroe's garage, she caught snippets of conversation between father and daughter. "You can't keep trying to fix everything," Claire was saying. "Not now, sweetheart, please." The drive home was quiet, with only the soft hum of the radio breaking the silence. Patricia seemed lost in thought, occasionally glancing at Rachel in the rearview mirror, as if trying to solve a puzzle. Finally, as they turned onto Rachel's street, the houses growing smaller and closer together, Patricia spoke. "Miss Rachel, working for the Monroes, it's not always simple. But they're good people, better than most who have their kind of money." Rachel nodded, thinking of Thomas's kindness and Claire's hidden depths. "I'm starting to see that." Patricia hesitated, then continued, "Keep your eyes open. And if you see anything unusual, anything that doesn't seem right, you come tell me first. Understanding." Before Rachel could ask what she meant, they had arrived at her house. The porch light was on, and she could see her father's silhouette through the window, probably wondering where she'd been all evening. "Miss Rachel," Patricia prompted. "Yes, I understand," Rachel replied, though she wasn't sure she did. Not really. That night, lying in her bed, Rachel's mind raced with questions. What was the Anderson contract Henry mentioned? Why did Thomas really want her around for the summer? And what had Patricia meant about keeping her eyes open? The next morning, Rachel's alarm clock blinked 6:30 a.m. when Patricia's car pulled up outside. She'd barely slept, her dreams filled with swimming pools and broken vases and secrets just out of reach. Her father had been surprisingly understanding about the Nova. After Patricia explained that Rachel had been offered a summer job with the Monroes, his anger had turned to cautious optimism. "Just maybe you'll learn something about how successful people live," he'd said. If he only knew. The Monroe mansion looked different in the morning light, less intimidating, but somehow more mysterious. Patricia led her through a side entrance into a large kitchen, where Claire sat at the counter, still in pajamas, drinking coffee and reading the morning paper. "Business section," Claire explained, noticing Rachel's surprise. "It's always good to know what they're saying about the family business, especially lately." Rachel caught Patricia and Claire exchanging a look she couldn't quite interpret. "Your father's already left for the office," Patricia told Claire, while fixing Rachel a cup of coffee. "He said to remind you about dinner tonight." Claire rolled her eyes. "How could I forget? Henry's bringing his nephew Michael." Another thrilling evening of business talk and awkward small talk. Michael's coming? Patricia's tone was carefully neutral, but Rachel noticed her hands pause briefly while pouring the coffee. Dad's trying to play matchmaker again, Claire said with disgust, as if I'd be interested in anyone Henry considers suitable. Rachel sipped her coffee, observing the dynamics playing out in front of her. There was so much being said in the spaces between words, in looks and pauses and careful phrasings. Well, Patricia said briskly, we should get Miss Rachel settled in. There's plenty to learn about the house. The morning passed in a blur of instructions about the Monroes' routines and preferences. Rachel learned which rooms were used daily and which were kept mostly for show, which doors tended to stick, and which windows caught the best light for reading. But it was the things that weren't explicitly stated that interested her most, the way certain topics were carefully avoided, the rooms they passed without entering, the photos on the walls that seemed to be arranged to hide gaps where others had been removed. During a break, while Patricia was taking a phone call, Claire pulled Rachel into what appeared to be a music room. A grand piano sat dusty and untouched in the corner. Look, Claire said, her voice low, about last night with Henry. Don't let him intimidate you. He acts like he runs everything, but he's just Dad's business partner. Why does he care so much about me being here? Claire's expression darkened. Henry cares about anything that might affect the company's image, and lately... She trailed off, seeming to catch herself. Just be careful what you say around him, okay? Before Rachel could press for more details, Patricia returned. Claire, your father called. He wants you to show Miss Rachel around the grounds today. Says it's important she knows the entire property. The entire property? Claire raised an eyebrow. Even the pool house? Especially the pool house, Patricia replied, her expression unreadable. Everything. As they headed outside into the summer heat, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that she was being given much more than a simple tour. Every new detail seemed to add another layer to the mystery of the Monroes, and somehow her crashing into their pool had placed her right in the middle of it all. She thought about the Nova, now towed away to some garage, and wondered if any part of her old life would remain unchanged after this summer. Looking at Claire's determined stride ahead of her, Rachel suspected she wasn't the only one standing on the edge of transformation. The pool house waited ahead of them, its windows reflecting the morning sun like knowing eyes. Whatever secrets it held, Rachel was about to become part of them. The pool house looked harmless enough from the outside, a charming structure with white-painted walls and large windows, but something about the way Claire hesitated before unlocking the door made Rachel's skin prickle with anticipation. Dad used to use this as his home office, Claire explained, pushing the door open, before everything changed. The interior was frozen in time, like someone had simply walked away one day and never returned. Papers were still scattered across the desk, coffee rings staining their edges. Her jacket hung over the back of a chair, slightly dusty but otherwise untouched. Your dad just left everything here, Rachel asked, running her finger along a row of filing cabinets. He moved his office to the main house around the time Henry became a partner, Claire said, moving to the windows and opening them to let in fresh air. Said he needed more space, but... She trailed off, distracted by something on the desk. Rachel watched as Claire picked up a framed photograph, wiping dust from the glass with her sleeve. Is that your mum? Rachel asked softly, noticing how Claire's expression had softened. Yeah, Claire's voice was barely a whisper. Before she got sick. The woman in the photo was beautiful, with Claire's same blonde hair and bright smile. She stood next to a younger Thomas Monroe, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. They looked happy, unguarded, nothing like the careful, controlled Thomas that Rachel had met. What happened? Rachel asked, then immediately regretted it. I'm sorry. You don't have to. No, it's okay. Claire set the photo down carefully. She got sick very suddenly. Dad tried everything, brought in specialists from all over, spent whatever it took, but nothing worked. After she died, he threw himself into the business. That's when Henry came in. Rachel noticed how Claire's tone changed when mentioning Henry. You don't trust him. It's not that simple. Claire moved to a filing cabinet, pulling it open with a metallic screech. Henry helped save the company when Dad was distracted. But lately, things have been weird. Dad's been acting strange, especially after the Anderson contract fell through. What was the Anderson contract? Claire was about to answer when a noise from outside made them both freeze. Through the window, they could see Michael, presumably Henry's nephew, walking around the pool looking at his watch as if waiting for someone. "Great," Claire muttered. "He's early for dinner. Quick, help me close everything up." As they hurried to restore the pool house to its abandoned state, Rachel noticed Claire slip something into her pocket, a small key that had been hidden behind the photograph. They managed to lock up just as Michael rounded the corner. He was handsome in a prep school kind of way, with perfectly styled hair and an expensive polo shirt. "Claire," he called out, his smile too practiced to be genuine. "I thought I might find you out here, and you must be Rachel. Uncle Henry mentioned you'd be working here." "Did he?" Claire's voice was sugar-sweet, but her eyes were cold. "How nice of him to take such an interest in our staff." Michael's smile didn't waver. "Well, we're practically family. Speaking of which, I came by early to discuss something with your father. Is he home?" "Still at the office," Claire said shortly. "Fire dinner isn't for hours." "Oh, that's fine. I'll just wait in the study if you don't mind. Uncle Henry gave me some papers to drop off anyway." Before either of them could protest, Michael was already heading toward the house. Claire watched him go, her expression darkening. "I need to see what he's up to," she said. "Rachel, can you do me a favor? Keep Patricia occupied in the kitchen for a while. I don't want her walking in on whatever Michael's really here for." Rachel nodded, though uncertainty gnawed at her. As she headed to the kitchen, she could hear the distant sound of Michael's voice from the study, too low to make out the words. Patricia was preparing for dinner, her movements efficient and practiced. "Everything all right, Miss Rachel? You look troubled." "Just trying to learn my way around," Rachel said, forcing a smile. "Claire suggested I might be able to help with dinner preparations." Patricia raised an eyebrow but handed her an apron. As they worked, Rachel couldn't help but notice how Patricia kept glancing toward the study, as if she too could sense something was wrong. The afternoon crawled by, filled with careful small talk and the rhythmic chopping of vegetables. Rachel kept waiting for Claire to appear, to give some sign of what she'd discovered, but the house remained quiet except for the occasional creak of floorboards from above. Finally, as the sun began to set, Thomas's car pulled into the driveway. Through the kitchen window, Rachel watched him exit the car, his shoulders tense. He paused, noticing Michael's car, and his expression shifted into something Rachel couldn't quite read. "Patricia," he called out as he entered through the kitchen door. "I wasn't expecting Michael so early." "He's been in the study, sir," Patricia replied carefully. "Working on some papers," he said. Thomas's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I see, and Claire?" "Upstairs, I believe," Rachel offered, trying to sound casual. Thomas nodded, his mind clearly elsewhere. "Rachel, would you mind helping Patricia serve drinks before dinner?" "In the living room, not the study. I need to speak with Michael privately first." As Rachel followed Patricia to the bar cart, she caught a glimpse of Claire on the stairs, her face pale. Whatever she'd discovered while spying on Michael had clearly shaken her. The evening ahead stretched out like a tightrope, with all of them trying to maintain their balance above a growing chasm of unspoken tensions. Rachel couldn't help but feel that tonight's dinner would be about much more than Thomas's attempted matchmaking. As she arranged glasses on the bar cart, Rachel's fingers brushed against something taped beneath the wooden surface, a small envelope, covered in dust but recently disturbed. She quickly pulled her hand away, but not before noticing the name written across the front in faded ink. Catherine. Claire's mother's name. The sound of Thomas's study door opening made Rachel jump. She could hear his voice, unusually sharp. "We'll discuss this later. Michael. Not here. Not tonight." Rachel glanced at Patricia, who was very deliberately focusing on mixing drinks, her hands steady, but her knuckles white around the crystal decanter. Upstairs, a door slammed. Through the window, Rachel could see Claire in her room, pacing, the mysterious key from the pool house glinting in her hand as she turned it over and over. The stage was set for a dinner party that felt more like a powder keg, and somewhere in this maze of family secrets and business dealings, a truth was waiting to be uncovered, one that had brought Rachel into the Monroes' lives for reasons she was only beginning to understand. The sun sank lower, casting long shadows across the pool where just yesterday Rachel's life had taken this unexpected turn. As she helped Patricia carry drinks into the living room, she couldn't shake the feeling that her crash landing in the Monroe's world hadn't been an accident at all, but rather the first domino in a sequence that had been set in motion long before she'd lost control of her Nova. The Monroe's dining room was a study in careful choreography. Patricia moved silently around the table, serving each course with practiced precision, while Rachel assisted, learning the rhythm of formal dining service. But beneath the classical music playing softly from the stereo and the quiet clink of silver against china, tension thrummed like a bass line. Thomas sat at the head of the table, his usual commanding presence somehow diminished. Claire picked at her food, shooting occasional glances at Michael, who maintained a stream of casual conversation that felt rehearsed. Henry dominated the discussion, speaking about business prospects and company matters in a way that seemed pointed. The Japanese investors were quite impressed with our presentation, Henry was saying, cutting into his steak. Though they did ask some interesting questions about the Anderson situation. Thomas's knife scraped against his plate. We've discussed this, Henry. Have we? Henry dabbed his mouth with his napkin. Because it seems to me we've done a lot of avoiding discussions lately. Rachel, refilling water glasses, noticed how Claire's hand tightened around her fork. Whatever the Anderson situation was, it clearly touched a nerve for everyone at the table. Actually, Michael interjected smoothly, I'd love to hear more about the company's early days. Claire mentioned something about the pool house being the original office. The silence that followed was deafening. Thomas set down his utensils, his face unreadable. That was a long time ago. Before my mother died, Claire said suddenly, her voice sharp. Tucks back when things were actually about family, not just profit margins and board meetings. Claire, Thomas warned, but she continued. What? Are we not supposed to talk about that either? Like we're not supposed to talk about the Anderson contract, or why you really hired Rachel's, or... That's enough. Thomas's voice cracked like a whip. Even Patricia paused in her serving. Henry cleared his throat. Perhaps this isn't the best time for family discussions. Michael, you mentioned wanting to show Claire those concert tickets. Michael reached into his jacket pocket, but Claire was already standing. I'm not interested in your clumsy setups. Rachel, would you help me clear these plates? Rachel moved to help, grateful for the excuse to escape the dining room's suffocating atmosphere. In the kitchen, Claire leaned against the counter, her hands shaking slightly. I found something in Dad's study while Michael was there, she whispered. Letters about Mom. Before she could elaborate, Patricia entered with more dishes. Miss Claire, your father asks that you return to the table. Of course he does, Claire muttered. Heaven forbid we disturb the perfect family image. Rachel started to wash dishes, but Patricia shook her head. Go with her, she said quietly. She needs a friend more than I need help with plates. Back in the dining room, dessert was being served, a beautiful chocolate mousse that no one seemed interested in eating. Michael was showing Thomas something on a piece of paper, their heads bent together in discussion. The board meeting is tomorrow, Henry was saying. We need to present a united front. The board works for me, Henry, Thomas replied, his tone final. So not the other way around. Rachel noticed how Henry's eyes narrowed at this, a flash of something cold crossing his features before his pleasant mask returned. As she poured coffee, Rachel's sleeve caught on the elaborate centerpiece, sending a cascade of water and flowers across the table. In the chaos of cleaning up, she found herself near Henry's place setting, where his briefcase lay partially open. Among the papers visible inside, one caught her eye. A familiar photograph, the same one from the pool house of Thomas and his wife, but with writing on the back that Rachel couldn't quite make out. I'm so sorry, she apologized, quickly writing the centerpiece. But she'd seen enough to notice how Henry hurriedly closed his briefcase, his knuckles white around the handle. No harm done, he said smoothly, but his eyes followed her movements with new intensity. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of coffee cups and strained conversation. When Henry and Michael finally left, the house seemed to exhale collectively. Well, Thomas said, loosening his tie, that was a disaster, Claire supplied. A transparent attempt to manipulate whatever situation you're not telling me about. Claire, please, it's been a long day. It's been a long year, Dad. Ever since the Anderson contract, I said enough. Thomas rarely raised his voice, and the shock of it seemed to surprise even him. He rubbed his temples, suddenly looking very tired. I'm sorry. I need you to trust that I'm handling things, like you handled things with Mom. The words hung in the air like smoke. Thomas stared at his daughter for a long moment, then turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Later that night, as Rachel helped Patricia with the final cleanup, she found herself turning over the events of the evening in her mind. The photograph in Henry's briefcase, the key Claire had taken from the pool house, the mysterious envelope under the bar cart, all pieces of a puzzle she couldn't quite see clearly yet. Miss Rachel, Patricia's voice broke into her thoughts, and sometimes the best way to help a family isn't by solving their problems, but by being there while they solve them themselves. Rachel looked at the older woman. You know what's really going on, don't you? With the company, with Henry, with all of it. Patricia dried her hands carefully on her apron. I know that Thomas Monroe is a good man who lost his way when his wife died. I know that Henry Norton was there to pick up the pieces, perhaps too eager to pick them up, and I know that some mysteries solve themselves in their own time. From upstairs came the sound of Claire's stereo, the Cure's Just Like Heaven, drifting down the hallway. Rachel thought about the letter she'd glimpsed under the bar cart, wondering if she should mention it to Patricia, but before she could decide, a sharp crash came from Thomas's study, followed by the sound of breaking glass. They rushed to the door, finding Thomas standing amid the wreckage of what had been a crystal whiskey decanter. I'm fine, he said, before either of them could speak. Just leave it. But as Rachel helped Patricia clean up the broken glass, she noticed what had caused the accident, a newspaper article left open on Thomas's desk, its headline partially visible, Anderson Family Questions, Monroe Corp Ethics in Wake of... The rest was obscured by the spilled whiskey, the ink running like tears across the page. That night, as Patricia drove Rachel home, they passed Henry's car parked outside a downtown office building, its lights still on despite the late hour. Through the window, Rachel could see him on the phone, gesturing animatedly. Remember what I said about keeping your eyes open, Patricia said quietly. Perhaps it's time to start really looking. Rachel nodded, thinking of Claire's stolen key and the photograph in Henry's briefcase. Whatever game was being played in the Monroe household, the pieces were starting to move faster. And somewhere in the pool house, in a dusty office frozen in time, answers were waiting to be found, if only they were brave enough to look for them. The next morning dawned hot and heavy, the kind of summer day where the air feels like syrup. Rachel arrived early, finding Claire already awake, pacing the pool deck with the stolen key in her hand. I couldn't sleep, Claire explained. I kept thinking about what I found in Dad's study. The letters, they were from Mom, written right before she died. But they weren't sick person letters, Rachel. They were warning letters. Rachel thought about the envelope under the bar cart, still undisturbed. Warning about what? I don't know exactly. Most of them were business stuff. Meetings Mom thought Dad shouldn't take. Deals she didn't trust. Henry's name kept coming up. Before Rachel could respond, they heard cars pulling up to the house, multiple vehicles arriving for what sounded like an impromptu meeting. The board meeting, Claire whispered. It's not supposed to be here. It's always at the office. They crept to the front windows, watching as Henry led a group of serious-looking men and women toward the house. Thomas met them at the door, his face composed but his shoulders tense. We should be able to hear from the study vent, Claire said, leading Rachel through a back hallway. Sure enough, voices drifted up clearly through the old heating system. The Anderson situation cannot be ignored any longer, one voice was saying, if what they're claiming is true. It's not, Thomas interrupted. Catherine's research was thorough. She would never have approved. Catherine isn't here anymore, Henry's voice cut in smoothly, and her old suspicions about the development project aren't relevant to our current situation. Rachel felt Claire stiffen beside her at the mention of her mother. I've called this emergency meeting, Henry continued, because the board needs to vote on new leadership. Thomas, your recent behavior, the irregular hiring decisions, the refused contracts, the time spent in that pool house going through old files, it all suggests you're no longer fit to lead this company. You've been planning this for a while, haven't you? Thomas's voice was quiet but steady, ever since Catherine started asking questions about your overseas accounts. A murmur went through the room. I don't know what you're implying, Henry said, but the Anderson contract, Thomas continued. Catherine figured it out. The money wasn't going to environmental impact studies like you claimed. You were bribing officials to ignore safety regulations. That's why she wrote those letters, to warn me, but she died before I got them. Dad never got Mum's letters, Claire whispered. But then how? Because I found them. Patricia's voice made them both jump. She stood in the hallway, holding the envelope from under the bar cart. Your mother gave them to me the day she died, made me promise to keep them safe until they were needed. From downstairs, the meeting continued. These are serious accusations, a board member was saying. They're desperate lies, Henry snapped. Thomas is unwell, grieving. No, Thomas's voice rang out clear and strong. I've been blind, but I'm seeing clearly now. Patricia? At her cue, Patricia descended the stairs, envelope in hand. Rachel and Claire followed, drawn into the moment. The study was packed with board members. Henry stood by the window, his usual polish cracking. Michael hung back by the door, looking uncertain. Catherine Monroe was a brilliant businesswoman, Patricia said, her quiet voice somehow filling the room. She discovered irregularities in the company's environmental impact reports. When she investigated, she found evidence of bribes, covered-up accidents, falsified safety data. She wrote it all down, kept copies of everything. In the pool house, Claire realized. That's why you wanted me to show Rachel around. You knew we'd find the key. Patricia nodded. Your father needed to remember on his own, to see the truth about Henry without being told. When Rachel crashed into the pool, right where your mother used to sit and read every evening, it felt like a sign. This is absurd, Henry spluttered. You can't possibly believe. The photograph, Rachel spoke up suddenly. The one in your briefcase, you took it from the pool house. You've been trying to get rid of evidence. Henry's face went pale. One of the board members stepped forward, holding out her hand for the envelope Patricia carried. I think, she said after reading for a moment, we should take that vote now. The next hour passed in a blur of legal terms and urgent phone calls. Police arrived to escort Henry from the property, Michael trailing behind him looking shell-shocked. Board members huddled in corners, reading through Catherine's letters and documents with growing concern. Through it all, Thomas stood by the window, one arm around Claire, looking out at the pool where everything had begun. I'm sorry, he said finally. I've been so lost since your mother died. I let Henry take control because it was easier than facing the truth. About Mom, about what she found? Thomas shook his head. About everything. About how much you needed me. About what the company was becoming. He turned to Rachel. Thank you for crashing into our lives when we needed it most. Rachel smiled, thinking of her old Nova, now replaced by a modest but reliable car Thomas had helped her choose. I think maybe your wife had something to do with that. As the last board members left, Patricia began making coffee, the familiar routine bringing a sense of normalcy back to the house. Claire helped, looking more relaxed than Rachel had ever seen her. You know, Claire said, bumping Rachel's shoulder playfully, I think we actually did become friends, just like Dad hoped. Was that really his plan all along? Part of it, Patricia interjected. He needed someone to help Claire open up, to start asking questions again, and he needed to remember what Catherine always told him. Sometimes the best view of the truth comes from outside the family. Rachel looked around the kitchen, at Claire teaching her father how to properly measure coffee grounds, at Patricia hiding a smile behind her hand, at the sunlight streaming through windows that no longer seemed to hide secrets. The mysteries weren't all solved. There would be months of legal proceedings ahead, investigations into Henry's dealings, reporters asking questions about the Anderson contract and Catherine's discoveries. But the heaviness that had hung over the Monroe house was lifting, like morning fog burning away in the summer sun. Summer was drawing to a close, the evening air carrying the first hints of autumn. Rachel sat by the Monroe's pool, her feet dangling in the water, watching the sunset paint the sky in familiar shades of orange and pink. The same colors she'd seen the night she crashed here, though everything else had changed. The pool house had been renovated, transformed into a memorial of sorts to Catherine Monroe. Her letters and photographs hung on the walls, along with newspaper clippings about the company's new direction, focused on environmental protection and corporate responsibility, the very things she had fought to preserve. Claire sat next to Rachel, both of them sharing a box of records they'd discovered in the pool house attic. The Smiths played softly from Claire's portable player, a soundtrack to their last evening together before Claire left for college. "Hey, Dad's letting me study environmental law," Claire said, flipping through album covers. "Says Mom would have loved that." Thomas had changed too. He spent more time at home now, learning to make coffee in the kitchen instead of taking it in his study. He and Claire had regular dinner conversations that sometimes lasted for hours, making up for lost time. "The company board meeting went well?" Rachel asked, though she already knew the answer from Claire's relaxed smile. "Dad says they're implementing all of Mum's old proposals, starting with a full review of the Anderson site. They're going to make it right." Patricia appeared on the patio, carrying a tray with 3 mugs of hot chocolate, her special recipe that had become their evening ritual. "Just like your mother used to do," she said, setting the tray down. "So she always said there was no problem hot chocolate couldn't help solve." Rachel took her mug, breathing in the familiar scent. Her new job at the company, a real position, not just a summer arrangement, would start next week. Thomas had insisted, saying they needed more people who weren't afraid to crash into established ways of doing things. "I found something else in the pool house today," Claire said, pulling an envelope from her jacket. Inside was a photograph Rachel hadn't seen before, Catherine Monroe sitting by the pool, reading a stack of papers, her face serious but her eyes bright with purpose. "She used to sit right there," Patricia said softly. "Where you crashed, Rachel, working late into the evening, determined to prove what she'd discovered about Henry's schemes." "Do you think she somehow guided me here?" Rachel asked, only half joking. Patricia smiled mysteriously. "I think love has a way of reaching through time, helping us find our way back to the truth." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one. The pool lights came on automatically, casting familiar patterns on the water's surface. "I never thanked you properly," Claire said suddenly, "for helping us remember who we were supposed to be." Rachel thought about her old Nova, now just a memory, about how sometimes the things that seem like accidents are really new beginnings in disguise. "Thank you for letting me be part of your story," she replied. A warm breeze rustled through the trees, carrying the last notes of the song across the water. In the distance, a car horn honked, Thomas returning from his final meeting of the day. Soon he would join them by the pool, asking about their plans for the evening, being the father he'd almost forgotten how to be. The mysteries were solved, but their story wasn't ending. It was just changing, like the seasons, like the songs on Claire's records, like the ripples that still moved across the pool's surface from their dangling feet. Rachel smiled, remembering Patricia's words from her first day. Working for the Monroes wasn't always simple, but the best things in life rarely were. Sometimes you had to crash through a few barriers to find your true path. Sometimes you had to break the surface to discover what lay beneath. And sometimes, on a summer evening that felt both like an ending and a beginning, you simply had to sit by a pool with your best friend, drinking hot chocolate, and let the moment be exactly what it was, perfect in its own simple way. Thank you for watching today's story. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel to relive the magic of the 80s every day with our heartfelt stories. May God bless you and your family. And don't forget to click on the video popping up on the screen right now. It's another totally rad story you won't want to miss. See you in the next video, and stay awesome.